Because I need a new disc, I think.
So do I.
I'm not positive yet, but I think I do. And it's kind of sad because this is not even that old. It's and I love me some Adata. I've never had one die on me. I still have 3.
Well, this is
in the house.
A spinning drive, and it is
you breathed on it wrong.
A little older, but it hasn't. It's just basically sat on the desk. Really, seriously, it was in an enclosure.
So you kicked the desk too hard one day.
3 terabytes there, right?
Seagate. Oh, Dan. The 3 terabyte Seagate has the highest failure rate of any Seagate ever.
I know. It's like an oddball amount, and I probably
you didn't know that when you bought it, I'm sure.
Not when I bought it. I knew that after the fact.
Yeah, well. Coming up in this episode, we're diskless. We take a leaf out of the history book. We climb the Alpine mountain, pick a very small editor, and we don our hoodies. Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 8 of Linux User Space. I'm Leo.
And I'm Dan.
Dan. How did it happen that both of us are having weird disk issues? I'll let you start. Because...
All right. Well, I got this 3 terabyte Seagate, which is noted for its ultra reliability.
No. Yeah,
just kidding.
Backblaze, I think Backblaze said that they were the most reliable, right?
I might be on the opposite end of that chart. I think it's down at the bottom, the worst
one.
Well, I won't say it wasn't important, but I'm not missing anything because I had it in multiple places, like you're supposed to, right? So I'm not missing data, but I am missing my space to put things, and so I'm a little bummed by that.
Right.
So remember that little power outage I had that I had to rebuild my router and do all of that jazz? Where it corrupted the drive that was in my router? Well, it also took this thing out at the same time.
Wow.
And so I don't know that it's the disk or if it was in the external drive enclosure, controller module. I don't know. That could be the part that's toasted. I haven't actually stuck this in a machine yet to see if there's any data on it still or if the disk is just totally toast.
But that 3 terabyte drive, we found out well after you bought yours, so it's not like you would have known.
Oh, yeah. They hadn't done any tests or anything like that when I had actually bought the thing. And I have had it for a while, but it's been working great. And it's a spinning disk. So the smart data usually will give you some warnings when it starts to fail or go a little south because it's a spinning disk. Whereas an SSD is just going to fail hard and be gone.
Well, the cool thing about the SSDs is they tend to fail open, so you can still retrieve data off of them after they die.
Right.
But once the controller's gone, I think you're really kind of up a creek at that point.
Right. So I don't know that it's the drive controller that's on the drive, because like I said, it was an external drive enclosure that was attached, USB to my machine that I just sort of use this for extra storage space and some backup things, just so I had another place to put stuff, because it is 3 terabytes. That's kind of sizable-ish, if you will. I mean, and when we're editing videos, I'd kind of keep some of that stuff until I know it's actually been pushed out to YouTube or someplace like that, where I don't need to keep all of the data. I just might need to keep the final version of something, the video files get big, so I'm just trying to save the original stuff until I know we've cleared the editing hurdles and everybody's good, and then I can get rid of the original stuff. I don't need to keep all of that because now I've got the compressed versions that we've actually deployed someplace. So
Yeah, it's like 20 gigs. Like just
they're
raw
big.
data.
Yeah,
It's like 20-ish gigs between us both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gets big.
And so I just need kind of like, I don't know, some temp file space most of the time is what I end up using it for.
Yeah, so scratch space. That's I have a disk that's exactly for that. I think it's ADAT. No, it's SK Hynix. I have the box over there.
That's a good one. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. They make memory, so
they do.
I figured
SSDs
right. I mean,
should be right in their wheelhouse, right?
Exactly. What is an SSD if not just
memory? Special memory, but yeah,
non-volatile, right? But still. Yeah, so I figured, why not? And it hasn't failed me yet, but it's not even been I don't think it's been a year yet. So I don't know for sure. But so far, it's doing pretty good. It's really fast. But I do have a disk that isn't doing so hot, and I'm in the same boat as you. I have historically, over the past year, had a couple of brownouts and a couple of full-on blackouts, just the same. And I don't know if this Adata SU630 is a casualty of that, or
well,
if
it stresses them, if nothing else.
Exactly, right? I mean, because there's no telling. That I don't know what I was doing on the machine in that moment, because my thought process was, oh God, the power's out, right? And it's the same deal. So I haven't gotten it into one of the cool little docks, plug it into another machine and figure out what's going on with it or anything. So I don't know that it's actually fully dead. But a few days ago, I'm in the middle of doing something, I think, and this is on my Linux Mint machine. I open it up, I go to Discord, and all of a sudden things are like not moving around correctly on the desktop, right? Like the stuff is freezing, but this thing is not freezing, and I don't know exactly what's going on. And then eventually I'm like, okay, I mean, after a minute or two of this shenanigan, I'm like, okay, things are hanging up. I should probably just reboot.
Yeah, try a reboot,
And I'm not confident that the menu will do me. So I open up a terminal, and it doesn't actually open up. So I'm like, whoa, okay, so something's really wrong.
Yeah.
I hard off the machine and then bring it back up. And I get the no bootable medium found.
No operating system or whatever. Yeah.
No boot. So, yep, that's kind of where it left me. And so, I'm glad that I have extra discs laying around, that I don't really have to worry about that too much, but that was disheartening.
Yep.
I don't suspect it had anything to do with the operating system that was on it. I have, it's the disk somehow, some way. The data got corrupted, or the disk itself is failing. But yeah, so yeah,
it's just a bummer, right? I mean, it's like we take all sorts of precautions and we've got backups and whatnot, but it's still slows you down, and it's a hitch in the giddy up. I don't know. It's a real bummer.
Yep, it really is, and that's annoying. But yeah, like Dan said, I have a couple of copies of the data that was on it anyway. So but it's just annoying. It's annoying, and it's not free to replace, right? I mean, I have other discs, but I paid for them, right?
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's not
same. Like I've got a bunch of I don't know if I have any this big. Yeah, I might. I think I might have some 4 terabyte ones, but I've got some 2 terabyte ones that probably will, sub into this, usage just fine, because I wasn't using all of the 3 terabytes that were on this one. So 2 terabytes is probably just going to be just okie dokie.
Yeah. So how is it, now my real question is, how is it did we both have disk failures in the same couple of weeks?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like, that's a good question. I think they happen on a regular basis for a lot of people, but like the power situation here, because of the storm season, I guess, was what triggered mine.
Yeah, we had excessive heat, so we ended up in weird situations as well. So I suppose that's both of our issues, but still, they failed in the same weekish. Huh. Mine was a sympathy failure. Dan.
It could be. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows? But anyway, I guess we'll get them swapped out and we'll get everything set back up.
Yep, sure will.
Still annoying.
If you like what we're doing here, make sure to send us a buck over at patreon.com/LinuxUserspace. We really appreciate our patrons. Really appreciate you guys. You guys make this show possible. It's not free to produce, right? So we appreciate any help you can give us. And if you haven't subbed on YouTube, do it. Do it now while you're waiting. youtube.com/LinuxUserspace is our channel. Go ding the bell and get all the notifications and stuff.
Back in 1997, Dave Cineage created the Linux Router Project, or LRP. It was a networking-centric mini distribution of Linux, and is described as small enough to fit on a single 1.44 megabyte floppy disk, and makes building and maintaining routers, terminal servers, and typically embedded networking systems next to trivial. The Linux Router Project is known to be one of, if not the earliest embedded Linux distribution, meaning it booted from some type of disk, loaded everything into RAM, and finally pulled the configurations, which were usually stored on a flash or floppy disk. It meant the operating system itself was stateless, or in other words, had amnesia. It would apply the configuration stored on the floppy or flash on every boot. So, changing the state of the router meant writing a new configuration file to the floppy or flash. The Linux Router Project enjoyed wide success until the second half of the year 2000, when money was running out. Of the near $4,000 needed at the time, Cineage had gotten less than $1,000. And the costs kept growing. The last releases of the 2.x series, 2.9.7 and 2.9.8, were released on July 29th and September 12th of 2000, respectively. Version 4.0 was slated to begin development the very next month. While Cineage was looking for cash flow, various new projects based on the Linux Router Project had been brewing for many reasons, including the 4.0 rewrite. One of which, in October, was the Linux Embedded Appliance Framework, or LEAF project. It was started by Charles Steinkuehler and David Douthit. Two of the more popular versions were Oxygen and Eigerstein. Oxygen was meant as an enhanced version of the Linux Router Project, version 2.9.7, with better package management, a fix for log overflow problems, and a new TFTP boot feature. Eigerstein specialized in easy setup of complex firewalling and DNS caching. These versions had lots of features or setups that just never showed up in the Linux Router Project. Up until January 2001, Cineage continued work on LRP 4.0, with not much to show for it. Cineage was unhappy with it, to say the least, because it wasn't shaping up to be any different than the 2.x series he had previously been releasing. So he began creating proof of concept work for 5.0, after abandoning 4.0 outright. But by this time, everything was way behind schedule. What should have been released in the summer of 2001 was barely showing any progress at all. Cineage was aiming for perfection. A new shell, a new scripting language, a new packaging system, full application management, and of course, dropping sysv init for a brand new init system designed by Cineage himself. But in January of 2003, after the Leaf project and others had been gaining popularity over the past 2 years, Cineage admits to himself the Linux Router project was done. It wasn't until June 22nd, 2003 that a public announcement was made. But most people knew it was coming. With LRP 4.0 abandoned in alpha and work on LRP slowing to a halt, the will, the code, and the money was just not there. While Dave gave up on LRP as a career, the Leaf project was still there, turning heads and ready to take the lead. The admins that hadn't already made the jump would end up using Leaf, one of its branches, or some other project entirely, like GNAP, the Gen 2 network appliance. GNAP, as its name suggests, sprang from the same need as LRP and Leaf, but using Gen 2 as a base. In November 2004, the 0.5 version of GNAP was released. 1 year later, in August of 2005, while working for a nonprofit company on VPNs and firewalls, and finding that no existing solution perfectly fit, Natanael Copa announced a new distribution on the linux.leaf.devel mailing list. He noted that, "I have been working on a proof of concept distro lately that I would like to describe as something in between GNAP and bearing uclibc." And bearing uclibc, by the way, was a specific branch of the Leaf project that used the bearing kernel and uclibc, a much smaller C library as compared to glibc, which focused on saving disk space. Copa's proof of concept distro was codenamed Alpine, and uclibc would be the C library. A new fork of Leaf was born. Alpine originally stood for a Linux-powered integrated network engine. The idea was that the distro would be focused on networking and be a tiny engine or framework to build bigger systems on. The earlier versions are a little cloudy, but we see Alpine 1.4 being developed in 2006, 1.5 in 2007, and Alpine 1.6 released on April 30th of 2007, and the switch to development of 1.7 in the days after. In 2008, October 18, while the 1.x branch of Alpine was still in full swing, we can see that already work was beginning on Alpine 2.0, with the first commit labeled added Busybox. In 2009, February 5th, Alpine 1.8 was released, and September 30th, Alpine 1.9. 1.9 is the first version of Alpine that ships with OpenRC and has the ability to install onto hard disks, features that we still see today. 2010, late February, early March, sometime in there, Alpine 1.10 is released and is also when the team learns their distribution is being used on servers. And shortly after, on April 9th, a new website is launched with a bit more styling than the plain text of the previous site. August 21st, Alpine Linux 2.0 is released and brought a new uclibc that broke ABI compatibility with older versions. If you wanted your binaries to work with the new native POSIX thread library, you'd need to recompile. November 1st, 2.1 is released and is the beginning of a tighter, 6-ish month release cadence, but with minor releases as necessary in between. 2011, May 6th, 2.2 is released with initial GNOME support, SHA-512 password hashing, and better disk partitioning. November 1st, 2.3 is released with the new Linux kernel 3.0, unbound DNS resolver, and encrypted LVM boot support. In 2012, May 3rd, 2.4 is released with better network, bonding, and VLAN support. November 7th, 2.5 is released with kernel 3.6.6 and GR security patches already applied. GR Security is an independent security company that at the time wrote security patches for the Linux kernel. 2013, May 17th, 2.6 is released with Kerberos over NFS support, PXE booting support, and the inclusion of a new technology that had been brewing since 2008 called containerization in the form of Linux containers, or LXC. As containerization was taking off in other spheres, mainly Docker, earlier in the year, Alpine was a perfect fit with its minuscule memory footprint and fast boot times. No other Linux distribution did it better at the time, and that was what the industry demanded. From here on out, Alpine is a mainstay. June 20th, the team announced, "We are recently receiving more and more support questions from users, but our infrastructure does not provide any place for them. To provide an easy way for users to contact each other and Alpine Linux developers, we have set up Alpine Linux Forum." The earliest posts were mostly about getting Zen working, and, of course, about the progress of Alpine 2.7. On November 8th, 2.7 itself was released as a normal upgrade and contained new versions and bug fixes, but nothing groundbreaking since the focus was now on 3.0. And on June 4th, 2014, Alpine 3.0 is released, and UClibc is dropped in favor of musl libc. Just like the 2.0 release, recompilation of old source needs to run its course again. This release also marks the beginning of ARM support, though no usable releases are available just yet. December 10th, Alpine 3.1 is released, and so is the first release built for the Raspberry Pi. 2015, May 26th, Alpine 3.2 is released and included the Mate desktop. December 18th, Alpine 3.3 is released with big renames of the editions that already existed. For instance, Alpine became Alpine Mini, and a new ISO taking the old Alpine name included more packages to support installations where network wasn't always available. The community repository is also created during this release cycle, containing packages from, you guessed it, the community. 2016, May 31st. Alpine 3.4 is released with support for running within VMs, better DNS support, and running on the Linux kernel's long-term support release 4.4. December 12th, Alpine 3.5 is released, and this marks the first version to drop OpenSSL for libc. As a result of the massive bugs found in OpenSSL back in 2014, including the infamous Heartbleed. It also included ZFS on root support and Python 3 improvements. 2017, May 24th, Alpine 3.6 is released with support for 64-bit PowerPC and IBM Z systems. Z? Z. Couple days later, as a side note, PostmarketOS, an Alpine-based Linux distribution focused on smartphones like the PinePhone, Librem 5, and others, has its first release. November 30th, Alpine 3.7 is released and now supports EFI and Grub within the installer itself, making installation a whole lot easier for folks wanting to see what Alpine is all about on real hardware. 2018, June 26th, Alpine 3.8 is released as one of only 2 releases that are released within 1 year, but brings with it NetBoot on all architectures, support for the Raspberry Pi 3, and the end of support for the last GR Security hardened kernel. 2019, January 29th, Alpine 3.9 is released with improved Grub support, initial support for the newish ARM v7, and the backtrack, like so many other distros, to OpenSSL. Many of the vulnerabilities that caused the initial switch had been addressed, and over the years since, many more eyes were constantly on the code. June 16th, Alpine 3.10 is released with LightDM for login and display management, which shows a renewed interest in running Alpine on the desktop. Also, IWD replaces WPA supplicant but is missing Extensible Access Protocol or EAP support for now. And this is important for enterprise deployments of Wi-Fi.
Oh, yes, it is.
December 19th, Alpine 3.11 is released with Raspberry Pi support, initial GNOME and KDE Plasma support, and the addition of Vulkan, DXVK, and the Rust programming language. In 2020, May 29th, Alpine 3.12 is released with support for the D programming language. And on December 29th, Alpine and others just do it better. So Leaf sees its last stable release at 7.0.1. 2021, January 14th, Alpine 3.13 is released and comes with official cloud images for services like AWS, Cloud Init, and better Wi-Fi support on the software side. June 15th, Alpine 3.14 is released with failed to ban, taking a backseat to SSH guard because it failed to ban. And ClamAV is now community supported. November 24th, Alpine 3.15 is released with kernel support compression using gzip. GNOME 41 and Plasma 5.23 land and disk encryption is now supported right in the installer. 2022, May 23rd, Alpine 3.16 is released, and the last release of this history. With better NVMe support, adding SSH keys at boot, a new admin user creation process, and a new setup-desktop script for desktop environment installation. And that is where the history ends.
Want to read the Linux news that matters as it unfolds? Well, head on over to our subreddit or our news channel on Discord. That's linuxuserspace.show/reddit or linuxuserspace.show/discord, obviously for the Discord server. And you can follow along. We try to get the latest articles as they happen. Leo's been doing a bang-up job there as of late. You'll read about great things like, Linux kernel 6.0 that just got released.
Wow. Not that it matters a whole lot, right? Because the numbers are arbitrary, but it's a whole new number.
Yeah, even Linus himself said that he just runs out of, fingers and toes. So eventually we're just going to go on to the next version.
Yeah.
We also have a Telegram space, linuxuserspace.show/telegram, and Matrix, linuxuserspace.show/matrix, where we can have some interactive conversations kind of on a daily basis.
And our experience begins. What a journey they had to go through to get to this point.
Yeah, I agree. And what a journey we had.
Yeah, I did not expect everything to go back as far as 1997.
No kidding. Yeah, so having fiddled around with some of those early days projects, probably somewhat unsuccessfully, though I think I'd had my own router going for a little while back then even. I'm not sure if the Linux router project was the one that I got to stick for a little while, but I did do something. And I do feel like that was one of the ones I messed with. But I had no idea that had morphed into what is now Alpine. I mean,
yeah. It never struck me that Alpine would have come from an embedded router solution, but looking at it on this side of the history, I realized
it totally makes sense. Totally,
it makes a whole lot of sense because initial versions of Alpine were stateless. They just read the configuration off of whatever you fed it during boot, and that's exactly how not just 1997 Linux router project routers ran.
Right.
That's how modern routers and switches
Absolutely.
run.
Yeah. So and some of them, obviously run Linux. So that's how they work.
Right. I mean, I know, I don't know exactly how much Linux Juniper runs, but once you get down into the weeds outside of, the Juniper specific language,
yeah,
it's very Linuxy underneath there.
Yeah, with certainly the file structures and some of those init systems that are happening there on, I almost want to say most of the major manufacturers are running that way, with probably the exception of Cisco.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got their own magic sauce, but like a lot of the other ones, they're running some sort of Linux kernel and file system, in there and running it in RAM, much like the early Linux router project.
That's the entire. I mean, I think it's a very valuable idea to be able to do something like that, and it really, I can't believe that idea was started and in '97.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surely prior to that, but it was one of the first stateless Linux distributions in '97, and yet it still persists. Almost 30 years later.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Like, it really, seriously, yeah.
Yeah, and we still do that kind of thing every day. But the most impressive thing I think about Alpine is that they took a turn adding LXC back in about what was it? 2012-ish, 2013-ish. 2013, May 17, where they add LXC.
Right.
And that just sets the stage for them to become the de facto base of, many extremely popular Docker containers.
Absolutely. There's so many images out there that are Docker images that the base of them is Alpine. You don't know that. Probably you probably don't pay attention to that. Like you're spinning up your Docker Compose thing, and it's just running through, and you get your application on the other side, right? A lot of them depend on Alpine, and so we joked last episode or the episode before that when we announced that we were doing Alpine that it was probably the most installed Linux distro, and that was why we joked about that, is because it is in so many images that are in Docker.
And we get to pad the numbers because every time you do an update, you throw away the old one and you get a new one. Therefore, a whole new installation of Alpine.
and with the way those things work now, they're just like spin up containers automatically, so it seems, on a whim, and as the load increases there's another one, and then eventually you've got hundreds of them running, and next thing you know, you've got hundreds of thousands of them out on the internet, and so that's how you get to be the most popular installed distro.
But the coolest thing I think is that, prior 1997 was when the stateless thing started happening, and Alpine obviously adopted that. But it is the absolute best segue that you could ever have asked for to create an ecosystem like Docker, because what are Docker containers if not stateless Linux environments?
Right.
That's exactly what they are, because your Docker configuration sits over here and the Linux container comes up stateless. It has to read the configuration file and build the container with those options as it's coming up. The exact definition of stateless. It just blows my mind that the original ideas came from early 90s engineers putting together stuff, because I just want to have my configuration on a floppy so that I can plug that in.
Yeah, and you didn't want to be reading and writing to that all the time, because Floppies were slow even then.
Exactly.
and
Just read. That's it.
Yeah,
just read.
Just read once and, get it loaded into RAM and then go from there. And I mean, that's basically how DOS worked, and even early days Windows. Like a lot of that stuff, you tried to load it to RAM as much as possible because reading it from a disk was really slow.
Very slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember installing Office, like early versions of Office. What was it, like 100 disks? And
Next disk, please.
Yeah, floppy disk 18 now.
18 of 32. Here we go.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, if you go back that far, you remember the stacks of floppy disks, and if you lost one, oh man.
Yep.
Sorry. Hopefully, one of your buddies has a copy. Of that particular disk, because otherwise
you're not proceeding.
Nope. Hopefully it's one of the extra disks that you didn't have to load up, but otherwise, you're. But the whole stateless thing, it didn't occur to me, but as I was doing the history, it just blew me away because it is the basis of pretty much everything cloud now.
Yeah.
So Alpine, just a fantastic piece of the overall puzzle of the internet. So very big, very huge.
Yeah, so it brings me to the 3 different ways that you can get this installed, right? Obviously, the first one is the diskless mode. That's where the system is loaded into RAM and run from there. Custom configurations and package selections may be optionally preserved using LBU or the Alpine local backup tool, which basically, commits and reverts the system states using this special APK OVL file. And those are saved to a writable storage location, and that's what's loaded on boot. So like the Linux, I mean, that's very much what the Linux router project was, or Leaf, where it saved the state of the system, if you will, when you told it to, onto the floppy, and then it would load that on boot time.
Exactly. So any change you made,
you had to commit
stored on a flash drive, or I would suppose modernly.
Yeah, now you would flash drive.
Is modernly a word? Modernly.
It could. It could be some network storage though too, but it's like probably something that isn't necessarily mounted per se, but like attached. So attached on demand, I guess is the best way I would term that, if you will, right?
I like that. And that is the stateless mode I've been
it is.
I've been talking about this whole entire time. So diskless mode is what it's called now in Alpine, because you don't have a hard disk, right? You don't have to have a hard disk,
right? Could be
to run
network
Alpine.
Storage place, USB, I don't know, whatever, right? Something that's not the system, right? So
right. And that I think is the beauty of it, right? Like Alpine is separate from the things that you want to do, and then you just mash them up, chuck them into RAM,
right?
And now you've got a full functioning system, and it'll be that way until you reboot. And at that point, you just load it all up again.
Yep.
And it does the exact same thing again, which is great for like kiosk systems and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Just for something that I can kind of make an example out of. You walk up to something, and let's say that you are able to get into that system and throw a rootkit in there or something like that, some kind of virus or whatever. Whatever. Reboot it.
Reboot it.
Just reboot it, and the system as it was prior to anybody messing with it is the way that it's going to load up at that boot. So absolutely fantastic way to approach dealing with stuff that, I mean, hey, you may not even have physical access to, which is kind of cool.
Right. And so that brings us to the next mode, which is the data disk mode. It's kind of similar to the diskless mode, where it runs in RAM, but you would have a swap and your entire VAR would get mounted from a persistent storage location. So
this is more what I was talking about with the flash drive, having a flash drive there or something like that. So, okay. So data disk mode, having
It's kind of a
storage.
mashup, though, right? So, like
Right.
the old stateless mode, but not quite a full system install. Somewhere in between, I guess, where you're only mounting a couple of bits, and running it out of RAM.
Right.
So like your swap is there on a disk, but that's not going to be persistent anyway.
Right.
And then your var, so all your variable stuff is going to get mounted, and that allows you to basically save your configurations and variable things. So like if you were running a web server or something, that would probably work pretty swell. Just gonna say, because that's where that stuff gets stored is in var. So your website would always come up the same and run in RAM, and then any configuration changes you made to your website, they would be there too next time you boot it.
Right.
They wouldn't get lost.
Exactly. And I feel like, you take the website down for a whole 5 minutes so you can clone that USB drive.
All right.
And plug it back in, and then you can make 10 other drives just in case,
right.
if that's the case, right? Like if the site is local to you, right? Like otherwise.
Yeah.
But definitely.
So super cool there. And then that brings us to the last mode. That's the
Now, this is the one that we used, right?
And it's the one that you would typically think of for a traditional Linux install to your SSD or hard drive. So this is what we chose. This is the system disk mode. This has got your traditional boot and swap and root, not like root the person, if you will, but like your root file system.
The whole file structure.
The whole file
thing.
structure. That all gets plopped down onto your selected storage device, and it's very much a traditional Linux system at that point. Just like, Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, you name it. Like that's how they all get installed. Is traditionally like this,
right?
Probably the way you want to do it for a traditional desktop installation, based on the configuration. Files need to be in a certain place, and you want a home directory, probably, because that's where all your personal files are going to be.
Well, how else are you going to run Firefox?
Ooh, you went there. Anyway,
I went there.
We'll get back to that in a minute. I just want to. I do want to give praises for the great options that are available there with those 3 different modes. They're very powerful. Not every distribution gives you that flexibility.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Is there an Ubuntu edition?
Well, you could kind of simulate some of those things with the data disk mode potentially.
But do you have to hack it together yourself?
You're going to have to hack it together because most of them don't run out of RAM, right? I mean, there are a few different distributions that do that, but most do not. So, that keeps this. It obviously has to be small and lightweight, or else it isn't going to fit into your RAM space. But it also makes it very fast, very, very fast to spin up new machines and clone another one and bring it up, just kind of crazy fast.
The exact definition of what is required for containerization, which is why Alpine is the perfect solution for that.
Yep. No kidding.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about how it went for me now. All right. I spent a great deal of time on my Toshiba laptop.
Potato. Everything is a potato, and I love it.
Everything I have is a potato. It really is.
That's amazing.
So I'll
never get enough of it. I'll never, ever.
Probably not. Anyway, so I installed Plasma on my install here, and it was pretty great. I spent the entire month in Wayland. So Wayland is default for whatever reason on Plasma, which isn't always recommended because, I mean, it's still a work in progress, if you will. Probably a little more than GNOME as far as Wayland. but it was good. It was really good. Like props.
Right.
So a couple props to the Alpine folks for putting it together, and then props to the Plasma folks for developing.
That's what the real heavy lifting was.
And bringing a good Wayland system these days. Good enough that I didn't even really notice most of the time. So that was cool. I didn't bump into any issues like that.
I did. What was interesting about that is we did on the live stream.
There was that
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well, okay, and so here's the thing, right? I guess in general, right? If you're coming into Alpine and you're like, hey, I don't want to do containers. I want to do a whole desktop. Why not? I mean, that's kind of what we did. Be prepared for a little bit, not the full, like, archway, the hard mode way, but you will have to read the wiki. You will have to.
You definitely
do.
It,
I would say Slackware level of,
maybe it's got some arch and void sort of feel to it a little bit. Maybe a little Slackware twist somewhere. It's somewhere in between all of those.
Well, as far as setup goes, running that initial script and then following the prompts, that's really all you have to do with Alpine. I mean,
I will say there's some great scripts that they have you run.
Oh yeah,
and so like that's some of the stuff that you don't get necessarily in some of those other distributions.
Just setup
dash Alpine, setup dash disk, like those things kind of like they pave the way for you, and they really do a lot of the heavy lifting on the other side.
Yeah, and Slackware doesn't do that, right? They're
That's
like,
right.
Just run fdisk or cfdisk and, figure it out, get your stuff done. But Alpine does have helper scripts to handle that kind of stuff for you, so it's not quite as hard as a Slackware install. But you do have to read the wiki. You need
to know which ones to run,
Right, and which packages to install to get, if you're aiming for a desktop, which packages to install to get a full desktop. Because during that live stream, it was kind of a back and forth of a few different wiki pages where it was like, what does that mean? I don't exactly know what that means, so I'm going to try this, and we'll install that, just in case. We'll install that too, because it kind of seems like we might need that. And we got to the finish line. How many times? It was like three times.
I think 3.
Yeah. And it would not boot. And this is in GNOME
booted,
boxes.
But kinda. Like you got the green color screen thing going on there. I don't know what that was.
And okay, so I will admit, I found out later that I didn't go and replicate it, but pretty sure, 95% sure, that one was on me because I forgot to swap it from Wayland to X and try the boot after the display manager SDDM. I did Plasma
on the stream,
and it just did not occur to me. I'm gonna blame you, Dan, because you were saying. I got it up. I got it working on Wayland, and I was just so confident.
Well, that was on hardware, not a VM. So
true, and it just did not occur to me to change.
Switch it
from Wayland to X. Had I done that,
well, we tried a bunch of stuff. So I mean, I don't know where we
had. I done that though, I bet you that would have booted up.
It might very well have. Yeah,
pretty well, and I'll tell you why I think that, because I did the full system disk installation on my ThinkPad, and I ran into the same thing.
Okay.
It, for some reason, I don't know why, and it's like it could have been my fault. So this is not an Alpine thing. I don't know that it's an Alpine thing. So it's very well my fault. But I got up and running, got Plasma installed, SDDM, got all the bits plugged in, followed the wiki as best I could. Wayland would not boot. Well, it wouldn't get me past the display manager. But when I swapped to X on my ThinkPad, it worked just fine. And at that point, didn't have another problem.
So it could be a display driver compatibility, potentially, right?
Possible, yes.
I don't know. It's kind of weird, but which I could have been the same thing in the VM too, right? Because VMs have their own little display server stuff that's going on there.
That is exactly what I'm thinking. Had I chosen X in boxes, it very likely could have just worked just fine.
Yeah. That's fair.
So
I didn't think of that. I did try it in QuickEmu, and it like kind of started it during the stream and finished it shortly after the stream, and that worked fine. So QuickEmu was kind of the answer quickly.
It quickly deflated my balloon of my nerd cred. You just take my nerd cred card away.
Well, I didn't mean to do that, but it did.
No. It was me.
It did work. And so at least that was good to see. I thought we were doing the right procedures, and it turns out we did. We did.
I think, I think you're right. Yeah, I think we were. I don't think we made many, if any, mistakes, but not choosing X was our fatal flaw, and that's what got me on a couple of different installs. So, but after that though, I think that was pretty much the last of my woes.
That was the hardest stuff. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Remember, we in the Void episode, I don't think either of us went with the musl option.
I think I tried that in a VM.
Okay.
So I probably didn't,
but not long term.
Right. I didn't, not long term. Probably didn't get a lot of things installed that way either. Just kind of went through the install process, if you will, and just checked out musl, a musl build to see how things went.
But with Alpine, you don't get a choice.
No, it's all musl. Yeah.
And the thing that you find out very quickly is you can't just go and get some binary.
You cannot.
And run it. And this is very specific. I'm thinking very specifically about app image. You can't just go get one of those and run them, because those things are compiled with glibc, not musl libc, and they just won't run. They won't.
Yeah, they don't have the right compile flags and all that stuff. Yeah, it's just not going to work.
Exactly, and that brings me to Firefox.
I mean, you need a web browser probably to do some stuff.
Yep. On a modern internet-connected system, like 99% of your stuff.
And I get you want to provide a open source variety of a web browser. Yep. Some of them stay up to date and current pretty good, but the one that was here was not. And
yes,
it was like it doesn't change. It's like it doesn't change from release date is the way it feels. Because we got Firefox 101, right?
Right. And I think, let's see, so May, which would have been the 5th month, Alpine 3.16 was released. Firefox 101
would have
in the repository was in June-ish. So it may have gotten an update, but we're at 105 now.
Yeah, it's not, it's not seeing enough updates, I don't feel like.
Right. But if you go to the Edge repository, now this is, I don't think either of us.
We did not try this.
We didn't go down as far as to figure out if you can get a single package from Edge, but Firefox was up to date in the Edge
repository. Yep.
Right. So I suppose there's a way that you can kind of like, most packages come from stable, but you can go Edge for a couple of different things. Surely
there's probably a way to wait that. We didn't dive into that yet, obviously. I think if you were spending a little more time in there, you definitely want to figure that out, probably.
Right. Or, I'm glad I didn't just, try it, because it may well have updated everything. And while it may be stable, I don't know.
Right.
I did not live on Edge, so I can't
Now that our testing is over, it might be the time to dive into something like crazy like that and then report back for sure. I tell you how I solved it. I mean, like Flatpak is a thing that's like up there in front and available, and it's kind of how I'm getting most of my applications these days. And so I just installed a web browser. I installed Brave and via Flatpak, and I was good to go.
Yep. So one of the things that you run into a lot once you get past like the Ubuntus and the Fedoras, you start running into a lot of distributions that do not use systemd. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that pretty much negates all of Snap. You cannot snap on a non-systemd machine.
You need systemd.
And so Right. And so on Alpine, we're on OpenRC, so
Right.
it's just not an option
Nope.
for us. But that leaves us with Flatpak, and I'm kind of happy with that.
Yeah, same. It leaves you with Flatpak and no app images either. So no snap, no app images.
Actually, that is very true because we're on musl libc instead of glibc, so
Right.
that negates app image for a different reason, but still we're without it.
Not there, yeah.
But that does leave us with Flatpak. And without getting too much into the weeds, yes, Flatpak is all glibc and all that kind of stuff. But the cool thing is that the runtimes are there to kind of
Right.
facilitate you running these glibc packages. But the cool thing is, cutting all the jargon out, you get to run the apps that you want, and the apps stay up to date.
Absolutely.
So what I'm getting at with this is Flatpak, to the distributions that adopt it, or at least enable it,
Mhm.
allow you to enable it, have made so many more distributions a viable option for a day-to-day distribution. That is amazing. Flatpak, you've done such everybody that works on Flatpak, from the absolute top to the absolute bottom, you've done so much to allow people to expand and just run silly things like Discord on distributions that would not ever have been able to run software like that.
Yeah. Or hey,
It
something
is
very fundamental
amazing.
like a web browser that is up to date. Right.
And that's how you get Firefox 105 on Alpine.
That's the easy way.
Right, without trying to figure out what Edge does and how
Right.
to integrate that into the system without breaking anything.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So Flatpak, you're my savior. You made this entire journey way better than I think it would have been otherwise. No app image, no snap. APK, which is the way that you install stuff in Alpine, is way, way different. What is it? It's APK add.
Add. Yep. That blows your mind every time. Like I mistype that every time.
Every single.
I want to type APK install, and that is wrong. Don't do that.
It's like
wrong.
It's like Pac-Man S. Like,
well,
guy.
Yeah, that one's different. But this one,
it breaks my brain.
This one is just like the word. It's a synonym, but it's not right. Yeah, that's where it breaks your brain. So here's the other thing: is like all of these things are coming from the community repository too, because the main repository is actually really, really small.
Yes, and Firefox lives in the community repository.
It does.
This is not something that Alpine deals with. I don't even know if that would be a thing.
I don't know as it needs to be.
Right. Exactly, because we've got Flatpak. We can get around this. This is not a big issue.
No,
but it is.
But because like it's certainly server first, if you will, distribution.
Yes.
The main repositories where you're going to get all those things. And they'll get the updates. Well, the security updates and stuff like a lot faster. That's where the focus is keep your system running, and then all of these other community things, they get updated too, just not necessarily on the same cadence. And sometimes like the Edge repository or the Edge channel will see the updates, and they might not make it to the regular stable update channel because it's supposed to be stable.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's very much like Clear in that I think the focus for Alpine on the desktop was not so that a regular Ubuntu user could decide one day that, I'm not trying to do Ubuntu anymore. We're gonna skip over the Fedoras and the Manjaros and the Endeavors, and we're just gonna go straight to Alpine. It's for the developers that develop on top of Alpine to have a similar situation on the desktop, so that you don't get this weird culture shock.
Right.
When, I've been working in Alpine all day, now I'm going to go to an Ubuntu box, which is totally different as far as your
package management tools are different. Like and
nobody else does APK.
No, they don't. And but your init system is different, and your C library is different. Like it gets you used to that whole and ecosystem, if you will, and get you comfortable with that so that you can translate that into the development work that you need to do on the server side, probably.
Exactly. It smooths the transition from desktop to server so that you can get your work done and just move along with life instead of fighting your distribution so that it behaves like the distribution that you're on all day for work or something.
I tell you what, though, it felt like a very functional, very well put together distribution, just the same. I had like no issues just doing daily task stuff on my laptop.
You're right.
That I do elsewhere. And that includes like watching, proprietary video codec stuff.
The old Netflix
test and the Hulu test. Like I did that. Like that's fine. Like that's what I do on my laptop in the living room when I'm sitting in the chair. Is I'll have a video going at the same time and be typing away into our Cody doc or something. It all worked. It was not there was not a hiccup. Like it just functioned.
And I have to agree. I mean, everything that I wanted came. It was either available as an APK ad, or I was able to grab it from FlatHub.
Yep.
And at that point, what else do you really need as far as a functional computer that runs Linux goes? I don't feel like you need much more than that. Now, once you start getting into, this one project from GitHub, I need to do this and that. Okay, maybe there's some differences between Alpine and anything else, but generally, if you can grab pretty much anything you want to from FlatHub, and I could, why not?
Yep,
I had a good time on it.
I had a great time.
The installations, you got to read, you've got to pay attention. But once you get past that, add Flatpak, it's pretty much like anything else at that point.
Yeah, and just for some context to how bad my potato machine really is, it's
I love it.
It's a 3rd gen i3 with 4 gig of RAM.
Wow. Okay, so for context, my ThinkPad is a 5th gen i5 with 20 gigs of RAM. So I've got a bit of an advantage on you.
Yep.
But yet somehow you were able to run Wayland, and I was not.
I ran Wayland. I was running, Hulu videos. Like, they didn't stutter or anything either. Like, I didn't notice it. And on top of all that, it's got a 5,400 RPM spinning disk drive in it. It's not even an SSD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, you really beyond the pale as far as what I'm dealing with goes. So,
yeah, it's a little slow to boot.
Kudos to you.
Beyond that, it just performed excellent. Like, it was just great.
Well, that's the best thing about having a minimal
system. Yeah, you're building it up from like nothing. Almost.
Exactly. They do all the heavy lifting for you with their cool setup scripts, but after that, it's pretty much up to you to decide, well, do you want that additional service running or whatever it takes that you want your computing experience to be like. You kind of get to decide.
Well, and I have to probably give some credit to the musl libraries, right? As far as being optimized and just working better, maybe? I don't know.
That is something that I couldn't quantify, but I kind of have to say it felt fast.
Yeah, it did. I didn't do numbers on anything, no, but...
We didn't run tests, but I do have to say that Alpine just ran fast.
It felt fast, yeah.
How do you... Yeah, without being able to back it up.
Yeah.
It is, but without backing it up with hard numbers or whatever, that's the best I can do is tell you, yeah, it was kind of fast.
Yeah. So I'm glad you had a good experience, Leo.
I did.
I might not keep it around on the laptop, but like I want to try it on some other systems now. I really want to try the Pi, the Raspberry Pi versions, and see how well those work, because like it worked really well on this machine, which is ancient. I want to see it run some other places, and maybe even some VMs and stuff too, just like some specialized server VMs just to run some things. I want to see how well it works there as well. I think it seems like it could be a top contender.
I mean, if you're not going out and grabbing random binaries from the internet to run on your system, I mean, yeah,
No,
you're
just
right.
utilizing the packages that are in the repositories for some of those basic level server things. Like, it seems to make sense.
Yeah, because at that point, why not?
Mhm.
Because you're getting the benefit of a very slim system.
Right.
You're getting the benefit of compiling with musl, which does give you a slight performance edge. And you're dealing with a Raspberry Pi in the first place, which doesn't have, i9 levels
No,
of
it does not.
performance out here. So it seems like a very good match.
It seems like a
And
good fit.
they've had Pi builds for Alpine
long
since
enough.
the very first Pi.
Yeah.
So they work well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
It's
there's a lot of
exciting.
other different variants too. I like that they give you a lot of options as far as ISOs to download, and they're all super small because like it's like it runs in RAM. It downloads the packages from the internet.
Yeah.
So all of the images are crazy small, and it's only downloading the things that you need to download. So
Exactly.
kudos to that
Man.
too.
Exactly. So if you like art, you probably like Alpine.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, or maybe even some void touches too, because OpenRC, like, it's got some similar feel vibe to it, right?
very much so.
So if you like either of those or the blend of the two, there you go. I'd say give it a whirl.
This is it. The most popular Linux distribution on the planet.
Yep. If you want to send us some email and get some feedback going, contact at linuxuserspace.show. And you can always get all of the links at linuxuserspace.show.
So the next show is one of those. For some reason, we decided to do history all the time.
We're loving it. We are loving it. It's been a lot of fun.
The history podcast. So
at least technology wise.
we got to pick another history thing, and we picked it in the last
we picked
episode,
it in
right?
the last one,
we did it during the feedback. So if you're caught up on your episodes, you already know what's coming. But if you're not, then buckle up, because we've done Vim and VI. We've done Emacs. We've done Ed.
Mm-hmm.
What we haven't done is Nano. And as far as the war goes, Ed, VI Vim and Emacs, that's where the war is happening.
There's a war there, but there's still a war between Nano and some of those as well.
Yeah, I think you get the folks that don't want to participate in the war
That
using
could be.
Nano.
Sure, I'll buy that.
It's a look, man. I just want to do the one thing and then make the change and then hit Control S and then leave.
Yeah, well, it tells me down at the bottom that I want to hit Control S to save that too, by the way.
Exactly.
So that's kind of cool.
The focus next time is going to be GNU's Nano. If you didn't get enough of the GNU,
that guy,
the GNU guy, or the Free Software Foundation, well, guess what?
We got another one coming.
Getting more of it.
Yep.
Getting more. So, we're gonna have some exciting topics as well.
I'm sure we'll have some feedback. Yep.
You need to let me know if you want me or Dan to take a side on an issue. I think you got to send it in. You've got to send it in. Contact at linuxuserspace.show, or catch us on, the places, Telegram, Matrix, Discord, blah, 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 blah. You know the places by now. We've told you a million times.
I think this next editor will hear a side of Leo, perhaps.
It's my favorite one. I use it all the time. What can I do?
We already covered my favorite, so, whatever.
I'm just changing the 0 to a 1, Dan. I don't need Vim bindings for that.
I guess.
The other thing that we have to do right here, right now,
We do.
is we got to pick a distro.
Man, this is going to be an all Leo month.
Oh boy, I've been fighting so long just to get Dan to tell me yes on this one.
He's not kidding.
Okay, so here's the thing. Before I even tell you what it is, I'm going to ask you to be a responsible netizen, right? That is
I'll
a
agree with that.
citizen on the internet. And before I even tell you what the distro is, I'm going to ask you to run it in a VM and do not give that VM access to the internet.
Yep, that's fair. Yep.
Unless, I probably shouldn't even unless, but I'm going to unless.
Where are you going with that?
You are pretty darn good with networking. Because, let me tell you why. Because some of the things that come in this distro are primed and ready to do not good things.
That's
on
true.
The internet.
That's true. I'm going to clarify something, and I'm actually gonna help you out here a little bit, Leo.
Okay.
It's not necessarily that they're poised to do bad things necessarily. That's not the intention of the applications that we get.
You're correct.
But bad things can happen if you're not careful. Let's put it that way.
Well, what do they say about dangerous tools? Is you have to practice with them. You have to know the limitations. You have to know what's going on. You really do have to just respect the tools. And part of that respect is understanding what goes in to using those tools.
With great power comes great responsibility.
I couldn't have said it any better. It didn't even come to my mind to say that, but beautiful.
There it is.
Absolutely beautiful. So, with all that being said, the next distro is Kali Linux. I really have. I've been chasing you for a long time.
You have.
Dan,
you have
to do this one. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, there really is a whole lot of things that could go wrong.
Oh yeah.
By using the tools that come into Kali, that come with Kali. That you just grab the regular one and install it, and it's got really helpful tools like
it does.
The Open Vulnerability Assessment System that you can use to scan your own network to find out your own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But as I was saying before, you put the wrong subnet in there, and now it's scanning out there on the internet. Don't just random, right? So if you feel like you see an IP address with a /30 at the end of it, or a /16 at the end of it, and you're like, I don't know what that is. Not the distro.
Yeah, maybe stop now. Yeah.
Yeah, just
normally we advocate that you maybe want to try installing this and follow along at home. You potentially might want to sit this one out. That's all I'm going to say. Like it could be like, if you don't feel comfortable with those things, Leo's right. You probably listen to the history that we're going to be giving you. We'll probably touch on a couple of the tools. There's no way we're going to be able to cover all of them in great detail. That's not happening. Nuh-uh.
I do like me some EtherCap and some Metasploit and some OpenVAS, but there's no way we can get through all of those things. So we're going to focus on the Kali, AKA backtrack history.
Right.
But some of those tools will make their way in.
Inherently that's going to happen. But certainly not all of them. Some of them have been there since almost since the beginning of the distro, I think. So we'll find that out
since before.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So cool stuff. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to embrace it.
Underneath it all, it really is just Debian testing.
It is.
If you plan on ignoring the tools and you just want to run the Kali for the Kali, then it does, right? Like there's no root login anymore. You log in as a regular user. You get a really cool Zish prompt and everything. And you can use it as Debian testing.
I love all that. Normally I do install these and run them as my daily driver. That's not going to be the case here. I am going to install it.
I'm going to do it.
I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use some of the tools that are in it for what they're supposed to be used for.
That is going to be the interesting part.
And so, but like, yeah, I'm not going to run this and watch my Hulu videos from it, okay?
Probably.
Yeah, that might not be a good idea. Yeah, just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do think if the episode goes long, I'm not going to say that it is, but if it does, if it accidentally goes too long, it's going to be because we get into the weeds of the tools and like the results that we got back and the things that we learned because of it.
Right.
But, right, like both Dan and I have a pretty decent background in sysadmin and networking and everything else, so makes a bit of a difference in a situation like this.
Yeah, and so like at work, we definitely have some commercial products that employ some of the same tools that are inside of Kali, and they do that sort of thing on a scheduled task basis, and then they display reports. So, but this allows you to do some of those same things on a one-time and have real-time information in front of you, so you can make remediation right there and then. So that's
exactly.
So that's the
point.
That's the takeaway, I think, that
it's
you
about
get.
Protection.
Mm-hmm. So stay tuned. Tell us all the things on Reddit, Twitter, Mastodon, Telegram, Matrix, Discord, whatever. However you do it, join the conversation. All the links and show notes on linuxuserspace.show. So Leo, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me at Leo Chavez on Twitter or at Leo Chavez at mastodon.social.
All right. And you can find me at KC2BEZ on Twitter and at KC2BEZ at mastodon.technology on Mastodon. Join us in 2 weeks when we return to the Linux user space. So reading through some of the early stuff before Alpine, I actually remember some of that stuff. I remember the Linux router project.
That is fantastic. I don't, and I wish I did. That is so cool.
I feel like I attempted to try to set that up once and failed, but that was a long time ago.
Knowing what I did in Mandrake around 2000-ish, man, no, LRP would have just destroyed me. And I would never have touched Linux again.
I didn't say I had success.
True. Well, you obviously have more gumption than I do, because I don't think I would have kept going after that, man. I'm just barely figuring out Windows 98 SE over here.
I feel like I tried that on some dumpster machine that I had pulled out, like a ancient thing, and just was hacking around on it anyway.